welcome, friends, to the International Brotherhood of Magicians official podcast. And my name's Jason Michaels. I'm joined by my co-hosts, Scott Cantrell and Ben Young.
Hi,
Fellas, how
everyone.
you doing?
Good, man.
Howdy.
How are you?
Oh, I'm great, man. It,
Good.
it strikes me that we've had some really great podcasts lately. We recently had an interview with Michael Dardant. We interviewed Baz from the David Blaine Do Not Attempt show. Got to talk to Keith Fields. Uh, but if I'm being honest, I've got a few topics that I want to get off my chest. I'm excited to talk to you guys here today.
Let's not do
This
let's not,
podcast, sorry, go on, Scott.
I was just gonna say let's not do too many too fast, right? Let's, gotta pace ourselves, Jason.
Exactly.
What,
I
Ben?
was just thinking that this podcast has sort of turned into like Jason's magic therapy.
What drives Jason Michaels
Maybe
crazy? Well, he'll tell you. Oh,
that could be that's a working title then.
exactly.
Up-
Oh,
up.
that's the working title. Well, let me tell you one of my pet peeves that I recently saw. So I saw, and I guess we should probably like spend a few minutes getting, doing our niceties and saying hello and lovely to see you. But I'm going to
We have
start
to
with a pet peeve.
we have to remember that there's people who could be joining us for the first time.
That's
So
Okay.
if this is your first time listening,
Yeah.
we're here. We talk about magic, and but we're not afraid to get into the nitty gritty. And if you don't want to hear that, then maybe go back to one of the other
One of the other
previous.
magic podcasts.
Actually, I think
Absolutely.
we started doing it from the get-go, didn't we?
Yeah, we
Just
pretty much
yeah.
pretty much went straight for it. It was like, yeah, let's see if we can frustrate some people. No, but yeah, this if you're interested in the art of magic, the entertaining kind, the type that is magic tricks, card tricks, sleight of hand tricks, misdirection, scripts, stagecraft, all of that stuff, well, you're in the right place. If you have ever wondered whether you're a professional entertainer or whether you're just somebody who has just a fleeting interest in the art of magic, that is what we discuss on this podcast. For the next few minutes, we're going to dive deep into that world and just kind of have a discussion between the three of us, all professional performing magicians. Some of us perform a little bit more than the others, but every one of us has a lot of time on stage and in front of audiences, and we have unique perspectives. Additionally, we're all members of the International Brotherhood of Magicians, which is the world's premier magic organization. Huge organization with members in countries all around the world. It is literally an international organization. Um, and we're excited to get to talk about this topic on behalf of the I.B.M. All right, so can I get to my pet peeve now?
I would love to
go,
hear it.
Jason.
Okay.
Go.
So I was online. I was scrolling my Facebook or Instagram or whatever,
Bad start.
and do what?
That's a bad
That's
start.
Yeah, probably. I see a lot of things that are pet peeves there. Anyway, I saw this performer had posted this photograph, and it was a photograph of this beautiful stage that they were going to perform on with their crappy looking 10-foot backdrop right in the center of it with their logo on it. And I thought to me, what is wrong with you? If you spent $1,000 or whatever it costs on a 10-foot backdrop that has your logo on it and it has your graphic on it, and you put it on an actual literal theatrical stage, you are an idiot.
Wait, I'm gonna find out who this is. Hang on.
No, I'm serious. I'm serious because I get it. I understand that you spent a bunch of money. I also understand that you're saying, well, what's the best way for people to remember my name? For my name, literal giant sign to be up in front of them the entire time. I get it. I totally understand all of that. But if it's a legitimate stage, like a proscenium arch stage that has lighting and has curtains, that is the image. You don't put a 10-foot backdrop on a 40-foot stage and think that looks good. You look like a fool. Go.
Who wants to touch
I
it
know
first?
you know what? Okay, so I have two notes. First of all, uh the backdrop was really expensive. I just got it. I wanted to show it off.
That's not. It wasn't your
And
photograph,
I
Scott.
just saying, I know I don't perform as much as you guys, and I'm just saying maybe, it just maybe a little bit, kid gloves with me with the backdrop thing, Jason. I'm just saying. I'm very sensitive
You are
person.
such a sensitive soul.
No, um, okay, so objectively, I completely agree. So no 10-foot backdrop on the stage. 100% because it looks so much better for you not to need it
Yep.
when you're on stage for multi-hundred seat or multi-thousand seat theater performing in front of the main curtain or in front of the back curtain, wherever you are on that stage. The image is going to look so much better. You're going to have so much more credibility. It's going to look so much more impressive if you don't have to say who you are, because the people who are there should already know who you are in that type of environment. So 100% agree. But you have this backdrop. You do want to feature it in some way. So, Jason, we've done this in lots of different places and venues, and Ben, you have too, I'm sure. How could you use that backdrop to facilitate presumably what that performer wants to facilitate, which is name recognition, visibility, use it in their social media and so forth? There are plenty of other ways that that backdrop could be used. Ben Young, what do you think? You're
Ben
raising your hand.
has his hand raised.
Well, I thought you were asking a question.
I
You're
am
saying
asking a
how
question,
could we use it?
and I would
And I
like you to
think,
answer it if you have an answer. Ben, please go ahead.
well, I think that the easy answer is to take pictures in front of it with people after the show.
Oh, hey, there's an
Do a little
idea.
meet and greet
A red
action.
carpet meet and greet. Yeah.
Yes. The carpet doesn't even have to be red. That's a hot
No, right.
industry
Because you
tip.
have a backdrop that you spent a bunch of money on. You don't have any
That's
money for a red carpet.
no carpet. Yeah. Uh yeah, yeah. I mean that's the easy way to do it, right? And you can set it up in the lobby. Sometimes if the space doesn't allow, I've seen people that they sort of set it up in the theater, but to the side, like on the actual floor that the seating is on, but off to the side, and they just do it over there at the end. Do whatever you need to do, but yeah, use the what I was going to say, nothing as insightful as what Scott said, but just like the idea of reading the room, and going, oh, right. Just because the way I normally do it is set up my backdrop behind me doesn't mean that I need to do that today.
Well,
Read the room, be in the moment.
let's dive a little bit deeper into this. What about when you're on a what about when you're on a portable stage? Let's say you're on a portable stage that's 20 feet wide and you've got a 10-foot backdrop. Does that look good?
I
No,
think I
it doesn't.
probably not.
So
Probably.
again, another setting where you shouldn't use the stupid thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Probably not.
Now
I
let's talk. Now let's talk. Okay, go ahead, Scott. Go ahead.
Well, just two quick notes. I think obviously whether it looks good or not is going to be subjective, although probably it shouldn't be subjective, right? You should have enough. You should either have someone that can help you identify when should I use this and when should I not, right? If that's what I would do if I had a backdrop like that or was actively using a backdrop like that. I would have a conversation with now I would certainly have a conversation with Jason because I don't want to be the object of his scorn. But the point is figure out when it should be used and when it shouldn't be used and how it should be used and how it shouldn't be used. I think those are just important general notes about stagecraft. All of that said, I think of course there are going to be instances where using said backdrop is going to be great
Absolutely.
and appropriate.
Absolutely.
And it's going to be dependent upon the environment and the audience and what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. The other thing that I'm throwing this out kind of as an observation, but also as a question. It is possible, and there are ways around this too, but it is possible that that performer has stuff behind the backdrop, and that's where they keep props, and so it's part of the quote unquote
Part
show.
of the show.
But if that
Yeah.
is the case, then you have to weigh, does this image undermine me enough to where I don't want to operate the show in the same way? And the answer, again, we always have to look at the show. It's hard to do, but we always should look at the show from the standpoint of what does the audience see and what does that experience that they have, what experience are they having? And so to that end, if in this instance, and I don't know that it was, but if in this instance it's part of the show in some way, then that's got to be really justified to create this image that otherwise to an audience might seem off or not quite right.
It's a weird image when you have a 40-foot
Yeah.
stage and you have this really high, 20 feet high, above, and then you've got this curtain, which is like, or it's a portable, sorry, not a curtain, a portable backdrop, which is 10 feet wide and maybe 7 or 8 feet tall. And it's just like this postage stamp on this other wise, beautiful stage. Now let's talk about when you can use it. Number one, I think you certainly can use it. Like if you like you're saying, like there's definitely a time and place for everything. If you're wanting to class up a birthday party show and you're going to go into someone's home and you want it to really look super slick and have these people go, wow, this is a serious performer. Absolutely use it.
Yep.
What about on a
Well,
portable
a school gymnasium, if you're doing an
school
assembly
gymnasium?
show,
Where you're on the floor.
you know, you're on the floor and you don't really have a theater, you know, you don't really have a stage at all. Maybe a slight riser, but oftentimes you're on the floor. Kids are on the floor in front of you or on bleachers. I mean, establishing the space of the stage in a room that otherwise would not have that space
Yep.
established.
Yep.
The backdrop can absolutely pull the whole show together. You know, it's not necessary maybe, but it certainly, you look at someone who has that set up, like a Ken Scott or someone like that, versus someone who doesn't, and the professionalism in that scenario is just, it's, you know, it's like night and day. I'm not, this is no critique one way or another on the quality of the performance. Ken is obviously incredibly talented, but my point is the backdrop can set the tone for, again, for the audience. It's really about what is the audience going to experience and what are they going to see and how are they going to react to that.
I'm not even
Yeah.
like, go ahead, Ben. I'm just like really passionate about this. Get into it.
Clearly, it seems like you have a lot of thoughts. Um, so, you know, I think that it comes down to using it with intention, right? Not just using it because, oh, I just always use it and I have it.
Right.
Because in a situation, and I know you were going to bring up portable stages again, and I don't think it's a black and white answer of whether it looks good or not with a portable stage. I think that there's times where it depends on what's behind you. And sometimes if it's a completely blank wall, maybe that works. But if you feel like it's going to help literally kind of frame the performance and actually like be, you know, I don't know, add something to it, then I think it's really beneficial. And I think that Scott's point about having things behind it is valuable too. And one person that I do think of that I believe does use this in theater settings is Mario the Maker Magician. He has his backdrop that's completely custom, and he goes behind it. Things fly out from behind it,
Part
but
of the show. Yeah.
and he uses it in theaters, but he's doing it in a way where it doesn't feel like he's advertising who he is. It feels like you're entering his world. It's not just a promo piece with his logo.
It's a stage prop. It's a flat. It's like a flat. It's part of the theater.
Yeah, it's part of the set.
Part of the
Yeah,
set.
well, I mean, if you're going to make it part of the set, okay, so here's how you could do, like, if you're going to do it on a portable stage, carry some pipe and drape, and then you put up you put up your portable backdrop, and then on the space that you have left over, you put up pipe and drape on each side of it, so that the entire portable stage is covered with some sort of fabric, whether it's a black fabric or whether it's your backdrop. If you're going to use it on a stage, so if you can make it, I mean, obviously that, you know, theatrical shows use flats, they use drops, they use all sorts of different stuff. But if you're just going to throw up your portable backdrop, the only way that I can see that really working is if you have full control of the lights and you're going to dark out everything except light just that thing. If you're going to turn off every single light except for the lights that are in the playing area where you're going to be standing and the lights that are hitting that backdrop so that the entire stage is just darkness except for the spot where your backdrop is, okay, I can see that playing. But if you're going to throw it up there because you're in a school gymnasium, you either nobody has told you that it looks silly, because all you have to do is step back and take a look at this image and it's like, oh look, there's this obviously purposely built stage, and then I'm throwing this thing up there. Yeah, if there are ways to do it, but you have to, like you all just said, it has to be intentional. It has to be done with genuine thought as to how to make it look good.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, presumably there's a reason that performers on that stage. It's because I mean, presumably, I'm making certain assumptions, but generally they're safe. It's because that performer earned the right to be on that stage. And if you earn the right to be on a stage like that, then own it. And use the backdrop in a different way.
Yeah. Any final thoughts before we go on to the next controversial
I
topic.
like
I
this.
think
It's
it's
like a quick hit thing. We could go through a big long
this is a lightning
list of
round.
Jason's pet peeves.
So I think it's worth thinking about with the backdrops if it didn't have promotional things on it, if it didn't
Yeah.
have your name or your website or whatever, this might be your logo, whatever. If it was actually just a backdrop, would you use it? Right. And I think that might help people, figure out if they want to use it in that setting, because it, like you were saying, if they're in a proper theater, I don't think they would use it. Right. Someone did, but you know what I mean? It can give you pause. And my words got mixed up, but I know what I'm thinking in my head. So people that are listening, figure it out. Just think about, would you use it if it didn't have promotional stuff on it? If it was just like, and they have those nice backdrops that are just curtains, that they're the ones that pop open, you can do them in 30 seconds and they're lovely. It's like, would you use that in this setting? Because if you wouldn't, then maybe don't use this. There we go. I got there. Thanks for hanging in there, everybody.
Spider backdrop or something like that, right?
Right. Yeah. Or the Jeff Jones ones that, pop open and look like, kind of theater things. If you wouldn't use that, would you use one that
have you guys seen you seen Bill Cook's setup, how he does his stage setup on cruise ships? It's very clever.
It's what like 4 stand-up banners, right?
It's like 4 stand-up banners. Like you can just buy these stand-up banners. They're relatively inexpensive, and he uses them spaced across the stage, so they literally do look like set pieces. And they have, I think that he has different, like one says Magic, one says Bill, one says Cook. But I mean, they're obviously promotional items, but they are designed as set pieces to make it look to frame the stage.
Yeah.
And crazy enough, I have no problem with that compared to throwing a.
It's a different thing, right? It's a difference between a performance backdrop and a set piece, right? Where the set piece can be off the side and it's enhancing the environment it's already in, as opposed to detracting from the environment it's already in.
And Bill's performing on cruise ships. He's doing a fly-on suitcase show. So he's doing a pack small, play big show. Yep. And those banners help fill that giant stage. Yep. It helps fill the space. But doing that 10-foot backdrop wouldn't do that same thing. It actually makes it smaller versus bigger.
Feel, right, exactly. Yeah, it takes away from that environment as opposed to enhancing it. Yeah.
If you're going to use that, you really can't venture out of it. You know what I'm saying? If you're on a big stage, 40-foot stage, and you're going to put that up there, you better stay in front of that damn thing. Because the moment that you start using the stage and you start moving and you start using different parts of the stage, which you should do, by the way, if you have any sense. But the moment that you actually start using the stage, then everybody's going to be like, well, why is that stupid backdrop up there? He's not even using it to frame the picture.
Can you scroll back through your Facebook and identify who that is? Let's have them on as a guest and just have them defend their position.
Hey, if somebody wants to come on here and defend their position, I have no problem. I have no problem letting them come on here and tell me why I'm wrong. They're just gonna have to, they're gonna have to really make their case.
I think what I think is important about this conversation. Ben used the word intentional. I think that's it, right? It's about asking these questions. And listen, I'm guilty as charged. There's way too often where I'm in an environment or I'm working on a show, and it's not just backdrop, it's every aspect of the performance. And we were just having a conversation not long ago with Michael Dardon and talking about the thinking through of environment and using improv and how to do it and all of that. And it is about being in the moment and understanding what that experience is going to be like in that performance space, and not just getting so locked into your script or so locked into your trick or so locked into, I always do this thing with the backdrop, so I'm going to do it everywhere, right? It's about understanding what this performance specifically needs, and being intentional with those choices that you make. And listen, we're not always going to make the right choices regardless, but at least if we're asking ourselves the question, there's a better chance we're going to get to a good answer than if we don't ask the question in the first place.
So what's the deal with magicians who can't do their time? Like comedians can do this. We're on to pet peeve number 2. All right, boom, here we go. I couldn't tell you. So I was at House of. So
How many pet peeves are we going to cover today?
There are
I'm not sure. It just depends.
17 pet peeves on this episode.
Okay.
So I was at House of Cards. We had a magician in, and this magician. Now, just so you know, if you are perform on the stage at House of Cards, more or less the amount of time that they want you to do is like 25 to 30 minutes, kind of in that general area. This magician did 50 minutes, 5-0. And I thought to myself, what is wrong? What is wrong with this person? What is going on here? That did they not own a watch? Were they not told you have 30 minutes to do your show? Why are you doing 50 minutes? And do not tell me, I swear to you, do not even try to tell me it's because, oh, I was killing, so I just thought I would do some extra time because the audience is going to love it. No, 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 no. You don't get to do that. You're told your time, you do your time. What is the problem with magicians who don't understand how to do time? I love how y'all pause.
It's like that old joke. How do you fill an hour? You give a magician a mic and tell him to do 15 minutes.
Yeah.
I just
I don't have a good answer for you.
I don't
I think
understand it.
I think there are well, let's put House of Cards as the example you're using, but we won't use House of Cards as the perennial example here because that's not what you're talking about. So a magician that goes over, we have to assume they knew how much time they were supposed to do, right? So we got to make that assumption. Otherwise, if somebody just says, "How long have I got?" As long as you want. Okay, well,
Okay.
but that's not what we're talking about. You're talking about the set needs to be 25 minutes or it needs to be 30 minutes or no longer than 30 minutes, no
Or
shorter
you're
than.
doing a spot on a show and they say you have 7 minutes.
Right, right, exactly. So I will speak from some experience on this. So this was one of those pet peeves of Jason's that I was guilty of for a while, longer than I should have been. Um, when I was a younger performer, um, I had tendency to not pay as close attention to my time, and it goes back to the point we just made. I wasn't as intentional. Did I know roughly how long my material was? Yes. I just didn't ask myself the next question. Okay, if I do this, 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 and this, I guess I have to add those things up. And some of it was just naivete and not knowing how long things took, not giving the audience time to clap or laugh, or not giving myself time to ad lib, because that's one of the things I enjoy doing. So I would just be off. I just wasn't dialed in. So that's just it was lack of flight time. It was lack of understanding how long things actually took. And this is the real guilty one. It was lack of not being intentional to hit that time that I was given.
Yep.
Just honestly about it. So those were the three things in my world. Uh it happened a couple times where I went, I won't say considerably longer than I needed to, but longer than I needed to. I wasn't like causing any acts to be cut from shows or anything like that, but I went longer than I should have, and I was told as much, and I was told by people that I liked, knew, and respected on why that was not okay. And I took that note to heart, and it wasn't like overnight I was able to just snap my fingers and be perfect. But I made it an intentional part of my pre-planning and pre-show activity to
Yeah.
know how long is this set going to be, even if I ad lib and da 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 da. And now I'm pretty sharp on it. I may be off a minute or two.
Yep.
Not if I'm on TV. I'll be right on time. But in a live environment, I might be off 30 seconds, 60 seconds, 90 seconds, but otherwise I'm pretty much on time. And that took a lot of practice and time. But those are my that was a weakness of mine and something that I had to consciously, intentionally work through to make sure I was. Here was the big realization for me. I knew that the audience was enjoying my set. I wasn't doing it purely out of ego, but there's probably a little bit of, I like when the audience claps and laughs at me, right? That's part of the point why we're performers. I like that. I get the juices flowing, so I would stay on stage longer. What I wasn't appreciating nearly as much as I should have was how that was impacting the other performers who might be on the show with me, or how it was impacting the event that I was performing at, and how it could throw things off, even depending on the event. I mean, especially if we're talking about tight production time like TV, 30 seconds matters. 15
Yep.
seconds can matter.
Yep.
When you start talking about 3, 4, 5, 10 minutes, on those shows, they'll just stop you. But in even a live performance, even if they let you go, it still affects everyone else. And I didn't have an appreciation for how it affected everybody else. When I understood
It's
that, I got a lot sharper and a lot tighter.
If you have 4 performers and each one does 5 minutes over, a 90-minute show just became what is it, 110-minute show?
Yeah.
Do you think your audience appreciates that? The
Hey,
answer
they
is
got more magic for
probably
that money,
not.
Jason. That's all I'm saying. I'm just saying.
Ben,
I
what do you
don't care
think?
about
Well,
their dinner reservations.
well, and that's something that I feel like, and I have a few different thoughts that I'll try to keep organized, but I think it's a like a weird groupthink thing, or the opposite of, where a magician goes, well, it's okay if I go overtime. But the thing is, if every
Yeah.
performer on that night had that same thought, then that's what stretches this thing out like crazy. The other thing that is worth mentioning is that in most cases, there's going to be some grace, right? I mean, especially in our world, I don't think people expect us to have everything, unless you're competing where you literally have the time limit or you're going to be disqualified. But the fact that it's the idea of trying to be reasonable with everyone's time. If they say do 25 minutes and you do 30, but people are having fun, that's probably going to be okay in most situations, especially if you're not on a show with a bunch of other people.
Yeah.
But there's that level where it goes, okay, that's too much, and I don't know where that level is, but I know that if you're supposed to do 25 and you're doing 50, that's not okay, right?
Yep.
That's at that point where that's too far. So I have a question for you all. Because I don't do this personally, do magicians in the moment decide to add more routines to their set, like on the fly? Are they prepped with just they have every trick that they know in their case and they have the set that they were going to do, but then they decide to just add more with reckless abandon?
Are you
Do you guys
okay? So,
know? Yeah.
so are you asking the question of for the people who are not paying attention to the time, are they're just is that the question? Or they're just adding extra stuff just to stay on stage longer? Is that what you're asking?
Is that something that happens?
I don't
Like,
know.
I mean, to me, when I'm performing, I make my set list and I prep all of those things. If anything, I'm going to cut something.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I'm more likely to make a longer set list, have
Right.
everything ready, and then in the moment go, I'm going to cut this, I'm going to cut
Right.
that.
Yep.
But are other people out there just having everything ready to go in their box, and then they just go, oh, well, I'm going to do another one. Oh, I'm going to do another one. I'm going to do
Well,
another one.
I will say this to a certain extent, the more that you do crowd work and the more that you engage the crowd, and that there's that sort of unscripted that you can't
Yeah.
really, you don't know how long an interaction might take. Scott talked about how we just talked to Michael Dardant recently, and we were talking about improv and the ability to use that to basically stay in the moment. It's entirely possible that a 5 minute trick could end up being, if you really like get into it, having fun, doing a lot of byplay with somebody, a 5 minute trick could turn into an 8 minute trick. It's totally possible for that to
Happened to
happen.
me last night.
Okay. Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
There
I
you
was
go.
doing the split deck routine.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. But I had a married couple up there, and the guy was just giving me gold.
There you
He
go.
didn't know he was. He was just trying to have fun, but he was just giving me gold, and the audience was loving it. And I just riffed with him a bit. And that trick is normally about 4 minutes, and I think it was about. I had a timer on the back wall I was paying attention to. It was about 7 minutes. My show
Yeah.
was scheduled to go 30 minutes, and it went about 34 minutes.
Yeah.
The thing that was different in the set was that. So yeah, it absolutely.
Hmm.
Now last night that 4 minutes wasn't going to matter, and I was told that before the show, so I didn't worry about it. But
Right.
but yeah, that's exactly, Jason. That is
So, but I mean,
perfect.
if you do extra time because of the audience interaction, and then you don't cut something,
You're going to go long.
you're going to go long. There's no way around it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And
And
so I agree with you, Ben. I'm much more likely to have the material for the right amount of time and to cut something. And I'll actually learn this from Jason, doing a lot of shows with him over the years. I mean, I always had something extra in my bag that I could do, even when I was first starting. But Jason has always been very, very intentional about alternative pieces of magic. So, alternatives, whatever the piece of magic is. So if something goes wrong, or if he decides to cut something in the moment, he's still got a material filler that he can put in that place if he needs to or decides to in a split second. Or if something happens and he needs to, go long for some reason, the organizer saying stretch for some reason, he's got additional material he can tap into. So before that, I wasn't being as intentional with that extra material, but I am now. But it's alternate material. It's not material I will do if the crowd is having a great time. It's extra material I will do if I need to. Something goes wrong. So
I mean, that reminds me of working for Brad Daniels when he always had he always had a set of leaking rings in the wings. He always had there are a couple of things that he had, and he could need them for any number of reasons. And there were occasions like when we might have been prepping the airplane to magically appear, where all of a sudden we go take him his linking rings, where he's finishing one trick and a tech just walks his linking rings onto him, and he's like, oh, apparently we're doing this trick now, because he didn't know what was going on backstage, but we did, and we knew that we needed an extra 3 or 4 minutes.
Yeah. And when you're performing and you have a situation like Scott had last night, where there's just a fun person, there's some sort of fun interaction, and it naturally goes a little bit longer, I think most people in most situations are going to, they're going to be fine with that. They're not going to go, oh, he really should have, because it's like, oh, he didn't plan this. It's like, that's not his fault. Like, people are having fun and there's this thing that happened, but it's when they're like, oh, you're doing another trick. Oh, you're doing another.
This guy won't get off the stage.
And when you sort of, and you guys know what I'm talking about. This is why I think that maybe magicians do this, and I can't wrap my head around it. But when you can sort of see their gears turning and they kind of look in their box and you go, oh, here's something. And you're like, oh, you weren't planning on doing this. You just have it ready to go and you just decided. But I think there's a lot of ego in it too, right? I mean, and Scott mentioned that once, and I think it took us too long to circle back to it. But I think that magicians like being in front of the people, and they like feeling so great about themselves, and just like me hogging the mic right now.
Well, I mean, there are repercussions for going long. So, I mean, number one, if you're on a super tight schedule on television, they'll just literally cut your segment and you don't get to finish your magic trick for the audience, and then you just look like an idiot. If you're on a show with other people, I did a spot on Winter Carnival of Magic years ago. I was supposed to do the wakeling sawing and my straitjacket, and I had to cut my straitjacket because some of several of the other performers went long, and we were looking at it was one, but I know exactly who it was. But the point is, this one performer went long, and we were all looking at the clock, and everybody was saying, what should we do? What should we do? And I said, what do you mean, what should we do? The audience is looking at the clock themselves, and I've been in the audience where I go, okay, we're 90 minutes in, or we're 75 minutes in, and there's still 3 performers to go. Are you for real? That's me as an audience member. That's not me as a magician. That's me thinking to myself, I know how many performers are on this show. How long is this show going to last? So you get people who are unable to do their material. And then there's just the simple fact of the matter of a pro learns how to do their time, and then you do it.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, that being flexible is really important too. I mean, I just had this thought. I had a gig a few months ago, big company. They were having this big leadership event out here in Vegas, and I was scheduled to do half an hour, like my half-hour stage show. And this was in the middle of like their awards ceremony thing. And literally, as someone is walking up to introduce me, the VP of operations goes, hey, can you do 25 instead? And I mean, they're literally saying my name. I'm like, sure, yep, no problem, got it. And I'm immediately, my head goes, I know what I'm cutting. Yep. I'm going to go out and do my thing. That's not the time to make a stink. That's not the time to go over. Right. Like, this is it. Like, this is your moment to do the right thing.
That's awesome.
So,
way to go. I give you kudos for your ability to think on the fly, and you make me proud.
If you could write those kudos on a check made out to
send it to Ben Young in Las Vegas, Nevada. We were just talking
where to send it.
Yeah, we were just talking about the Winter Carnival of Magic that I had to cut an act from there, but we haven't really talked about the Winter Carnival. Now I know that we're like what are we like 6 weeks or 2 months past
What are you
the
talking
winter.
about? We're recording this. We went to one
Oh, well,
3 weeks
by the
ago.
time this comes out,
Oh,
maybe
I see.
we don't
I
understand how
I'm thinking full
podcasts work. Thanks
convention.
for
My
bearing
bad.
with us.
And that's how the recipe gets made, folks. Sometimes we record these podcasts before we release them. Thanks for pointing
Yes,
that out, Scott.
Scott,
Anyway, it's been
don't you
quite some
remember?
time.
I'm just
Yeah,
saying. Well, okay,
it's
okay. So let me just.
June, Scott.
Now I feel guilty about something. That show I was talking about was actually 3 weeks ago. Apparently, I don't even know. All right, go ahead.
So we were just at the Winter Carnival of Magic, and not long ago, and we had a lot of fun. It was a great convention. All three of us were there, and there were several performers that were just outstanding. And there's some people, and
It, it
there were
was it
things
was
that,
it was it was. Let me say this. It was a fantastic convention. It was a
it was,
stacked group of talent, and it was fantastic. So go ahead,
it
Scott.
was. There was, it was, yeah. Uh, I will point out a couple of performers. Understand that there are more that I could be pointing out. But a few of the performers that really struck me, Dan Sperry, who actually is going to be at the IBM convention in July. Um, I just throw that in there just so you know. But Dan Sperry, when he's on stage, he's such a specific character on stage. He's such a specific type of performer with a very specific style, and he makes choices and decisions. And the the magic that he performs, the way he performs it, the scripting choices, the words he says, all support who he is on stage. Jeff Hobson, same thing. Jeff Hobson was fantastic. So much fun. His comic, his lines, all the different jokes, all the different moments, everything just fits. And it is so him. Stephen Bargatze, he's a blast. He's always fun. Very specific who he, it's interesting. I was talking to Stephen after the convention. Maybe it was at the convention. I said, Dan, you've got Dan Sperry, who's really a specific type of character, and you've got Jeff Hobson, who's really a specific type of character. I said, I always think of you as like this. I say, it's hard for me sometimes to figure out what your character is, but like you're like killing from the moment you walk on stage. So obviously, you know who you are on stage. And he says, I'm like that crazy dad or your crazy great uncle. That's who I am on stage. And so my point is, all of the performers are all strong characters, and they all came across to me as incredibly authentic. This may not be who they are, but there is very much elements of them rooted in who they are on stage. So there's that. And then I saw several performers who were so forgettable, I don't even remember who they were. And that is the problem. So, what is the deal? Why is it so hard for magicians to define who they are? Why is it so hard for us as performers to make stylized choices that support who we want to be seen as on stage and have a level of authenticity, some level of reality to who I actually am built into who they're saying on stage? Because um, I'm not saying that the performers that I saw that were forgettable weren't good. They were certainly competent magicians, but they weren't as memorable as a Dan Sperry or a Jeff Hobson or a Stephen Bargatze. What
So
do you guys
related
think?
to backdrops being on stage, I just say no. So I want to put this in context because that's how I do things, as you all know, right?
True.
Um, the one issue that comes to mind is at a magic convention. I won't speak directly to Winter Carnival, I'll speak broadly. But at a magic event where you've got so many magicians, there are certain magicians that are more and I think I fit this category. Um I'm not a Dan Sperry. I'm not a Jeff Hobson. I'm not a Stephen Bargatze in terms of how heightened and amplified their characters are. I'm an amplified version of myself. I'm going to go do a show for lay people, hopefully I've done a good job so they remember my name, but at the very least, hopefully they remember the experience and that they had a great time.
Yep.
But I'm not necessarily I am a character in that it's not the Scott that's on this podcast.
Let me ask you this
Scott's
though.
on
Are
stage.
you a character or are you a persona? Because I think of a persona
Care.
more as like you amplified versus a character. Like to me,
I'm a persona.
Jeff Hobson on stage is a character versus
Agreed.
if you talk to Jeff in person.
Right. Right. And I think the three you mentioned, you could name others. I think the three you mentioned are characters. Steven is kind of a blend, but Steven in real life is not the same guy you see on stage, especially in certain, with certain types of audiences and stuff.
Yep.
Um, but
Although
he's
there
still
are
just
elements.
he's still just as funny.
Yeah.
But all that to say, yeah, I'm a persona. Using the definition, I think it's good to delineate. I'm a persona. So you put me on a Winter Carnival stage or a Magic convention stage. I mean, I'll just fully admit, hopefully people will remember the magic and the experience. But I don't know if they're going to. I mean, just honestly, I'm just being transparent. I don't know that I'm probably going to be in that quote unquote forgettable group.
That you know what? That's totally fair. That's
Yeah.
totally fair. That's
So,
okay. It's okay to say that. I mean,
but
and it
because
takes guts to do so.
when you press that many performers together, right, who are all magicians, it's like comedians, right? I mean, I haven't been to a comedian convention. I guess the closest thing would be like a comedy festival where you're seeing comedian after comedian after comedian. There's going to be extreme ones like a Jim Carrey, right, who might really stand out. Nate Bargatze would probably stand out just because of how subtle he is, right? So he's the other side of the spectrum in terms of style and form.
Yeah, sure.
And but you're going to remember those extremes. You're probably not going to remember the folks in the middle as much. And that doesn't mean they're not great at their craft. It just means that in that environment they're not going to stand out. That all said, I think the question you're asking is still very legitimate, and that is how can we make character driven or persona driven choices that make us less, I'll use these words, that make us less vanilla, that make us less bland, that make us less boring. How can we be more interesting? Again, outside the scope of a convention where there's a bunch of magicians, but in front of a layperson, how can we make character choices that, or persona choices that make us more interesting, fascinating, entertaining to that group? I think that question is still, that's a great question for all of us to answer. My 2 cents.
And it's difficult. It's difficult to sit down and try to think about who you are outside of magic. And the easy way to do it is to look at other things that you're interested in outside of magic and then try to implement that. But sometimes that can come across a little forced as well. But it might be a nice kind of gateway to get into it. I really like what you said, Scott, about the extremes, because the thought that came through my head was larger than life.
There
But
you go.
what
Yeah.
you said is really more accurate, because when you mentioned Nate Bargatze, especially, he's not larger than life. He's the opposite.
Yeah.
But it's those extremes that tend to be more memorable. Dan Sperry has the really gothic look, and that stands out at a magic convention. Jeff Hobson has that flamboyant kind of comedy character. Bargatze, it really is like his own thing, which I think we talked about at the
Yep.
convention. We were trying to analyze it. But is someone else that I know you mentioned as well as Michael Tricks, who has a great Dove manipulation act, just kind of a manipulation act in general. And he implements a lot of like 80s rock into his show because that's something he likes outside of magic. And that is really what stands out. And I think it's like that idea of letting people in to who you are and not doing magic exactly like you've seen other people do, not just buying the trick off the website or reading it straight from the book and doing it exactly as is, but taking a second and going like,
sorry, hang on. Don't read the instructions and do exactly. Got it. Go ahead. Sorry.
but taking a second and going, what's the hook that has, besides the fact that it's a darn good magic trick, like what's the hook that makes this feel related to me in any way, shape, or form? Like, don't just do a Rubik's Cube. How many Rubik's Cube acts Never mind. But
There are 42 quintillion Rubik's Cube acts.
Funny.
I think it's 63 or
Oh, is
65.
there a six? I
Yeah.
don't know.
Not that I do any Rubik's Cube at Magic, but like, if you don't actually enjoy performing with, I'm going to turn it into Jason on this. Oh God, here we go.
Bring it
If
to me.
you don't actually like Rubik's Cubes, don't do Rubik's Cube Magic.
Ooh, what an idea. Boom, drop
Like,
the mic.
And to be fair, I don't do any. I've thought about it, but I don't. But I taught myself how to solve a Rubik's Cube late one night, junior year of high school. I had one. I decided I'm going to learn how to do it. I stayed up till 3, made flashcards of the algorithms, brought the flashcards and the cube with me to school every day. Like, I have just written a great premise for a Rubik's Cube magic trick already, and it's completely based in truth.
Yep.
So do that exact thing with the magic you do. Thank you so much. I'll see you next week.
Boom. Nice. You know, the thing, I mean, yeah, that's all of that is very good. It does make me wonder, because right now, when people are hearing us talk about this stuff, some of the people are going to take this kind of personal. They're going to be like, are they talking about me? And
yes, we are.
Well,
No.
here's the question
Talking
I have
about
to ask you.
ourselves.
Here's the question I have to ask. How well, but and I have a reason for asking the question. Years ago in Nashville, there was a magic club that was created specifically with the intent that we would all get together and we would constructively criticize each other's work. And we had a pretty good turnout, but we had every month we had 1 or 2 people that they performed, they got their notes, and we never saw them again. And there were a couple of times when we heard through the grapevine that the person who we never saw again, or the people, they were talking to another magician and they were like, those guys are brutal, man. They'll just tear you apart. And so my question is, how well do you take constructive criticism? Actually, my question is, how well do you take criticism? And then I'll nicen it up a little bit and say, how well do you take constructive criticism? Because supposedly that's how we're supposed to do it. We're supposed to be constructive in how we give our criticism. How well do you take constructive criticism? Seriously. What do you guys? How about you guys? I mean, look, I'll tell you the truth. I've put stuff out there that I've worked on, that I've had thoughts behind, that I've implemented some level of some level of myself into it, done it for magicians, and had them say, this wasn't good, and this is how you can improve it. And if I'm being honest, it stung. It stung. It hurt a little bit. So the one thing I can point to is that, coming from an acting background, the one thing that you learn is, after every rehearsal, you get notes and you learn. I remember when I was in college and people were like, "Oh, this director's notes are brutal." You learn how to have no ego. You learn that your job is to go out there, put on the best performance you possibly can, get your notes, and then guess what? You're supposed to implement those notes, and then into the next performance, and then the whole process starts again at the next rehearsal. How well do you guys take notes?
So, he's going to do a bit. Hold on, let him do a bit.
No. I'll save the bet. Go ahead, Ben, because I haven't quite worked it out in my head. It would have been awkward and weird, and you guys would have criticized it, and that would have made me feel bad.
That would have made.
I'm still working on it. Go ahead.
Would have stung.
So, well, but as we talked about with Michael Dardant, you can't be afraid to fail. So do the bit, with reckless abandon. So what I've learned about myself in the past year or so is, and this is not just with criticism, but I tend to have a hard time sort of processing emotions in the moment. Things have to sort of sink in, and my brain has to sort of work through them later. So what that means is, a lot of times in the moment, somebody tells me something, and where maybe they feel like I should be more upset or something in that moment, maybe I don't show a lot. It doesn't really matter what I'm supposed to feel, but maybe I don't show a lot in that moment. But I do have feelings about it. I have a lot of feelings about it. And it just takes me a while to sort of process that and think about it. And what I've found with criticism is it's the same way. And hopefully this is helpful to people, because in the moment, if someone tells me something, my guard tends to go up. I get a little bit defensive. But then if I give myself the time, when I'm not face to face with that person, to actually think about, well, is that actually a plausible thought? Does that make sense? Then I can kind of work through it and I'm more open to it. So I'm always open to criticism. I'm just, that sting at the beginning is hard, but if you can listen to it and then process it later, tends to be pretty helpful.
Yeah. My experience in terms of in being intentional and kind of formalizing how I accept a note or criticism is very similar to Jason's. In fact, we're probably talking about the same director that we both had in school.
DMC.
Say again?
DMC.
Absolutely. Um, and so being in the theater, I was already a performing magician and already been part of a magic club. And obviously, sometimes you can. I was especially young in Ring 58, and I would go do a show or do a performance at the club. And then, my mentors or folks I knew, liked, and trusted with my magic would come up and give me a pointer or show me something. But they were doing it more as a teacher than from a critique standpoint. So it was a critique, but it was truly a teaching moment, right? An opportunity to teach. And I was young, and so I was a sponge and absorbed all that. And I think that's really an important. The tricky part is when you start to figure out who you are on stage and you start to have a little bit more confidence. And then people are coming up, right? When you feel like you know a little bit about what you're doing, and then people are coming up and giving you critique. And so I think there's two. Oh, what? Go ahead.
Oh, when it's not, oh, hey, you flashed there, or it'd be more efficient to do it this way, when they're actually saying things that feel personal to you.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
exactly. No, obviously, if you flash or something, and hey, you flashed on this, just keep that in mind, or turn your body a little bit. Right, those are just quick technical things. That was what we're talking about, but not really, right? We're talking about the bigger stuff, like you said, Ben, that things are more
Yeah, it's
personal.
personal.
And I've made intentional choices, and now those choices are being questioned, right? And so I think there were two things I learned about taking criticism in acting class and in theater in general, and I've also in business, doing work for a lot of different companies and being on both sides of that, right? Being a coach or consultant, that's whose job in many ways is to give constructive criticism. That's what I get paid to do day to day. And then being on the receiving side of that, right? And there's different rules on this, but the first thing is consider the source.
Hmm.
So just being very brutal about it,
True.
consider the source. So if that source has no, and this is something I've heard from Jason and has been reinforced by our conversations, but if that person or individual doesn't mean they don't have good ideas, doesn't mean they don't have expertise in certain areas, but if that person doesn't come from a place where they could bring something positive to you, doesn't mean you don't have to listen to them or doesn't mean you don't listen to them. Just understand the source of that note or the source of that critique. Um, for instance, if Jason gives me a note, or if Ben gives me a note, or Stephen Bargatze gives me a note, or Kevin King gives me a note about related to magic stuff and seeing me perform, I'm going to take that note to heart and I'm going to listen to it, and I'm likely going to act on it in some way. If some random layperson comes up to me after the show and gives a critique about a trick I've been doing for 20 years that I know kills, and they've got some critique about it, then I'm going to listen to them, legitimately going to listen to them,
Yep.
but I'm less likely to take action on that. So that's point one, is consider the source. Point two, and this is how you accept a note. I was always taught in theater school and did some improv training too, where even in improv you get notes. Um, and the way to accept a note is thank you. You repeat the note and say thank you, or you say thank you and then repeat the note. And that's just reinforcement that you understood and that you're accepting the note for what it is. Now, in those situations in theater class, you're like Jason said, you're expected to implement because you're not the boss. You're not making, the director's the boss. In your own
Yep.
show, it's the same thing. If I'm going to get a note from Jason or whoever, Stephen, Kevin, Ben, whoever, I'm going to thank them for that note. And if I'm really engaged, I'm going to ask them additional questions, or I might try to explain my point of view and get into a conversation that probably will produce something better. But you got to be open to it, and it's hard not to be defensive, like Ben said, in terms of choices that you've personally made. And listening to that critique, that doesn't, just because someone gives you critique doesn't mean you have to change it.
Yeah, that's true.
But when someone gives you a critique, especially when it's someone that should be in a position to give you that critique, and especially if it's solicited, you've asked for it in some way, then you have a responsibility as an artist, as a performer, to listen to that critique with open ears, and truly objectively ask yourself, what does that critique mean in terms of my performance next time?
That's great. It's great. As we wrap up, Ben, is there anything else that stands out to you that I guess, on any of the topics we've discussed?
Well, Jason, if you
Yes,
could
Ben.
maybe not be so fiery at the start of every episode.
It feels like some constructive criticism.
And the background in your office leaves a little bit to be desired. I think if you had a background that had your name, I think that'd be lovely.
Thank
look,
you,
I know
Ben. Thank you. I will work
know,
on not being as fiery, and I will also consider the background.
I thought about some of those same notes, Ben, but at the end of the day, I just know I'm not going to really remember him. So I just
Man, Michael Dardant would be proud of y'all's improv callback skills.
no.
I've had an hour to think about it.
Yeah.
So the only thing I do want to say for people that are listening that feel like we're just complaining about everything in Magic, that's not really what we're trying to do. We're just really trying to open your eyes to just thinking about things differently and doing them differently than the way you've been doing them, right? If it just makes you ask a couple of questions about like, well, why am I doing this or why am I doing that? That's all. We're just trying to better Magic. And honestly, having these conversations is helpful for me too. It's like these are good reminders for me to keep thinking about things and not just be on autopilot. So I hope people get something out of it, even if it sounds like we're just yelling. I know I yelled for the first time on the podcast today. So
it's the first time for
it was a big
everybody.
moment for me.
My time's coming.
We'll get you fired up one day.
You'll be next.
I completely agree with Ben. I mean, these notes and going through these, I mean, these questions that Jason's raising and our responses to them, transparently, they're as helpful for me as I think they would be for anybody, because it's forcing me to answer them, right? And forcing me to ask myself, you know what? That's a really good point. Am I even considering that when I'm performing, right? And am I looking at that? Am I considering the environment with a backdrop, or, am I forget? I mean, I'm the timing thing, right? I transparently went through that, and not perfect, but much better. So yeah, these questions and these responses, to Ben's point, are as helpful for us as we hope it is for everyone who's watching and listening.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you for listening. This has been the International Brotherhood of Magicians official podcast. Hey, we'd love for you to join us this July in Houston at the I.B.M. convention. The I.B.M. convention has about a ton of talent. About 20 different entertainers have been hired so far to perform shows, to lecture, to hang out and jam with you into the late night hours. These are some of the finest, some of the most talented magicians, literally from all over the world. There's performers coming from Italy, from the United Kingdom. Everybody is converging on Houston. If you want more details about this convention and joining us, check out ibmconvention.com. That's ibmconvention.com to get more information, to take a look at the schedule and see all the different folks that are going to be there. If you want to learn more about the IBM itself, check out magician.org, magician.org, O-R-G. We would love for you to connect with us. All of our social handles and the ways for you to communicate with us are in the show notes. And if you have enjoyed this podcast, leave us a review. Leave us a review. You can specifically say Jason yells too much if that's what you really want to say. But we would love a review, and we would love for you to subscribe so that the next time that we put one of these out, you will be notified. You can leave us a review. You can subscribe. You can do all the things on the podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, as well as on our YouTube channel. Anyway, this has been a whole lot of fun. For Scott Cantrell and Ben Young, my name is Jason Michaels. We will see you guys next time.